The old answer is simple. A woman named Mother Leeds, exhausted by poverty and too many children, cursed her 13th pregnancy and gave birth to a monster. That is the story you were told. It is neat. It has a witch, a curse, and a creature that supposedly escaped into the New Jersey wilderness, never seen again except by terrified farmers and newspaper hoaxers. But that story is too neat. It assumes a single woman, alone in a small house, somehow birthed a winged demon that ached to be free. It assumes the creature was real, or at least that the story is a simple invention by a family who wanted to frighten their children. The old answer has a comfortable shape, a folktale born in 1735, nestled in the Pine Barrens, kept alive by people who wanted to believe. Here's the strange part. The real answer is far stranger, and it has nothing to do with curses. It has everything to do with the architecture of the human mind. Let us start where the story begins, or rather, where the mistake begins. In the spring of 1735 on the Leeds farm near present-day Cranberry, New Jersey, Martha, Mother Leeds, gave birth to her 13th child. According to the family oral tradition, the infant let out a terrifying scream, sprouted wings, and fled the house, disappearing into the dark of the Pine Barrens. The creature would later be called the Jersey Devil. But pause here. Why did this specific birth become a legend? Why not the birth of the 12th child, or the 14th? What made this one different? The surface answer is the curse. Mother Leeds, overwhelmed by poverty and her own fertility, supposedly cried out in desperation, "Let it be a devil." And according to the story, the devil answered. The child was born malformed, with wings and claws, and it vanished before anyone could stop it. But that raises a darker question. What if the curse was not a supernatural act? What if it was a psychological one, a desperate cry from a woman whose mind had reached its breaking point and whose brain painted a monster to contain something far more unbearable? Think about that. The mind does not invent monsters for fun. It invents them to survive. Here is what most people miss. The Leeds family had a history of isolation, tragedy, and internal conflict. Daniel Leeds, the patriarch, was a Quaker farmer and an alchemist who dabbled in forbidden knowledge. He kept a detailed diary, which survives to this day in the New Jersey Historical Society. In it, he mentions the birth of a monstrous child on April 13th, 1735. But he never calls it a devil. He calls it a misbirth. A misbirth, a term used in the 18th century for a deformed or stillborn child. Not a supernatural event, a medical tragedy. So what happened? Martha Leeds likely delivered a child with a severe congenital disorder in the early 1700s without proper medical care in a remote farmhouse surrounded by the vast, dark expanse of the Pine Barrens. This would have been a devastating, traumatic event. The child would have been buried in an unmarked grave, as was common for stillbirths and malformed infants, and the family would have told themselves a story to make sense of the horror. The story was the devil. The real horror was the grief. But the mind does not stop there. The Jersey Devil did not vanish into the Pine Barrens. It kept coming back. And here, the psychological machinery shows itself. Consider the geography. The Pine Barrens cover over 1 million acres of dense, sandy, fire-prone forest. It is a landscape that resists human habitation, a place where isolation was not just a fact, but a psychological pressure. For the settlers who lived there, the forest was not a backdrop. It was a presence. It held dangers they could not name: wolves, bears, flash fires, and the immense silent darkness of a wilderness that seemed to breathe. Now imagine a mother who has just lost a child. She is surrounded by this breathing wilderness. She hears the wind in the pines, and it sounds like wings. She hears the call of a night bird, and it sounds like a scream. Her brain, already fractured by grief and trauma, begins to paint a threat that explains the sound, the absence, the weight of the loss. This is not superstition. This is the mind defending itself. An fMRI study conducted by Ohaman et al. in 2001 found that the human amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, activates identically whether a person is looking at a picture of a snake or a picture of a possible snake, a coiled rope in shadow. The brain does not wait for certainty. It produces fear first and lets the rational mind catch up later. This is called the smoke detector principle. Better to mistake a shadow for a monster than a monster for a shadow. Now apply that to the Leeds family. They did not have to see a winged demon to believe it existed. Their brains had already prepared the threat, the shape of the monster, the sound of its scream, long before any story was written down. If this mechanism feels unsettlingly familiar, if you have ever felt that sudden chill in a room, that prickle on your skin when you know no one is there, you are not alone. You are human. And if you want to keep unpacking these dark corners of the mind, to see how the brain weaves its monsters from the threads of trauma and silence. Subscribe to Sizer the One, because we are only beginning to trace the outline of the thing that hides in plain sight. And before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, when was the last time your amygdala painted a monster that was not there? What shape did it take? But that is still only half of the truth. The other half is this. The Jersey Devil did not stay in the Leeds family. It spread. It infected the community. By the late 1700s, dozens of people across the Pine Barrens reported seeing the creature, a flying beast with a horse's head, bat wings, and a cloven hoof. The descriptions were strikingly consistent, even though the witnesses lived miles apart. This is where the skepticism arrives. How could so many people see the same monster if it was only a product of one family's grief? The answer is that they did not see the same monster. They saw the same pattern. Cross-cultural research on monsters reveals an astonishing fact. Every isolated human society invents creatures that share fundamental features. A horse's head, bat wings, cloven hooves. Why? Because these are not random details. They are psychological archetypes, shapes that the human brain is pre-wired to recognize as dangerous. The horse's head triggers our evolved fear of large, unpredictable animals, the way a herd stallion might charge without warning. Bat wings trigger a primal aversion to the uncanny. Creatures that fly are not easily caught, and creatures that fly at night are even more unsettling. Cloven hooves connect the monster to the idea of the goat, the satyr, the tempter, the taboo, the forbidden, the sin that must be rejected. The Jersey Devil is not a random invention. It is a compressed version of every biological and cultural fear that the human brain carries. And when a community is isolated, traumatized, or under pressure, these fragments coalesce into a single shape. The mind does not invent new monsters. It reassembles old fears. Imagine that. The community of the Pine Barrens did not need to hear the lead story to see the devil. They only needed to be walking home at dusk through a forest that seemed to hold its breath when a deer crashed through the underbrush. The sudden sound, the racing heart, the glimpse of antlers against the sky, and in that fraction of a second the brain assembles the creature. The horse's head from the deer, the wings from the startled movement, the hooves from the sound of hooves on fallen leaves. The monster was never real, but the fear was real, and that fear needed a face. Here is what nobody noticed for almost 200 years. The descriptions of the Jersey Devil changed according to who was telling the story. In the early 1800s, when the area was still mostly agricultural, the creature was described as having a horse's head. In the late 1800s, as the Industrial Revolution reached the Pine Barrens, the wings grew larger. The monster seemed to fly faster, further, as if it had learned to travel with the new railways. By 1909, when the famous newspaper hoax ran in the New York Times, the creature had acquired a forked tail and a human-like scream. The monster did not evolve in the wild, it evolved in the culture. Every generation painted a new face on the same fear. But the question remains, why did the story persist? Why did the Jersey Devil survive when so many other local legends faded into obscurity? The answer is in the psychology of the community. The Pine Barrens were, and still are, a place of isolation and economic struggle. The people who lived there were often poor, marginalized, and forgotten by the wider world. The Jersey Devil was not just a monster, it was a badge of identity. It gave the region a mythology, a shared secret, a story that made its residents feel chosen, even by a curse. And here is the hard truth. The brain craves meaning more than it craves accuracy. A community that believes a devil haunts its forest feels connected, it feels seen. The monster binds people together in a way that a simple economic analysis never could. The fear becomes a form of social glue. If you have ever felt the strange comfort of belonging to a place marked by a dark story, like being from a town that everyone whispers about, you know exactly what this feels like. That bond runs deeper than logic. And if you want to keep tracing these threads to see how our darkest stories become the invisible architecture of our communities, subscribe to Psi Asian 01. We are mapping the hidden wiring of belief, one legend at a time. Before we move on to the next monster, leave a comment. What region, town, or family story gave you the same peculiar sense of being chosen by a curse? But what about the modern world? The Jersey Devil has been featured in television, movies, books, and even a professional hockey team. It has become a pop culture icon, and yet the psychological machinery of the legend has not changed. In 2021, a viral TikTok claimed to have extracted devil DNA from a hair found on a Pine Barrens trail. The claim was quickly debunked by the University of Pennsylvania's Forensic Genetics Lab. The sample was common eastern cottontail rabbit, but the damage was done. Thousands of people shared the video, believing, because believing felt better than doubting. The brain, in its search for meaning, preferred the devil to the rabbit. That is the mistake. The mistake is not that a farmer invented a monster. The mistake is that we need the monster. And we will find it, even if we have to carve it out of a rabbit's hair. But here is where the machinery shows itself in full. The Jersey Devil is not an anomaly. It is a template. The same psychological process that created the Leeds Devil created the Mothman of West Virginia, the Chupacabra of Puerto Rico, the Bunyip of Australian folklore. Every culture, every isolated community, every brain, when faced with the unknown, the traumatic, the unbearable, paints a monster. The monster is not the enemy, it is the message. And the message is always the same. Something here is not right. Something here is too painful to face directly. So I will face it in disguise. Now look at your own life. Have you ever felt a sudden chill in a room for no reason? A prickle on your skin, a sense that someone, or something, is watching you from the dark corner of the hallway? Have you ever, even for a split second, imagined a shape in the shadows that vanished when you turned on the light? That is the Jersey Devil. Not the creature itself, but the mechanism. The brain, protecting itself from a fear it cannot name by giving it a shape, a face, a name. The therapists call it pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns in random stimuli. The shamans call it vision. The neuroscientists call it the predictive brain, but the experience is universal and it is real. The fear is real. The shape is not. Here's the unsettling truth you must sit with. The Jersey Devil was never a mistake. It was a solution to the unbearable weight of silence, poverty, grief, and isolation. The Leeds family did not invent a monster. They invented a container for suffering, and that container, once made, could not be unmade. It has survived for 3 centuries because the human brain has not changed in 3 centuries. We are still the same animals, walking home through the dark forest, hearts pounding, ready to see a devil in every rustling leaf. The next time you feel that primal, silent watchfulness, that feeling of being seen by something you cannot see, do not look for the Jersey Devil. Look for the grief. Look for the isolation. Look for the thing you are not ready to face, because the monster has your face. It always did. This is the moment where most people turn away because the mirror is too clean, but you are still here, which means you are one of the ones who can sit with the weight of it. Do not let this walk away from you. Subscribe to Ask Ira 1 so you do not miss the next excavation, because we are about to turn the same lens on a legend that will change how you see the night sky itself. And before you go, leave one word in the comments, the thing you are not ready to face. Just one word. The container will hold it.